Greetings. I am Shannon Register, the Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education. The purpose of this video is to explain the purpose of Personalized Education Plans, PEPs, and how to use PowerSchool to complete your PEPs. The North Carolina State Statute, House Bill 804, required that all students identified as being at risk academically receive a PEP. This included students who scored level 1s and 2s on the end of grade or the end of course test, received red or yellow on the TRC measure K3, or any other data that indicated that students were not on grade level. The statute has been revised to give school districts more autonomy in selecting which students are at risk. So this has implications for our PEP practices and expectations for the 2015-2016 school year. The purpose of PEPs. We want to monitor the progress of at-risk students, ensure that these students are making progress towards reaching their academic goals. Also, we want to make data-informed decisions, especially when students are not making expected growth, and then collaborate with parents and other educators in the decision-making process. Due to the change in the law, the following are Hope County Schools' minimum requirements for students who are required to have a PEP. Any student who meets any of these minimum requirements must have a PEP in place. Students retained in current grade, students placed on homeless status, students deemed at risk and referred to SAT. Now, these students must have completed 6 to 8 weeks of intervention on a Tier 1 PEP and have a Tier 2 PEP started prior to being referred to SAT. Any student who receives a letter B, identification for a possible retention letter at the end of the second quarter, and then any student using our professional judgment that is deemed at risk. Once it is determined that a PEP should be developed, we will utilize the Response to Intervention, RTI, tiering system. The next 3 slides explain each tier more in detail and will help when determining which tier a student belongs. Tier 1 supports are often interventions within the classroom. Remember, we always want to start with the least restrictive or lower level of intervention support if possible. If the Tier 1 interventions that are in place for an extended period, and that period is usually 6 to 8 weeks, do not yield results, you may then consider moving the student to a Tier 2 for the next quarter and providing an additional level of intervention. Now, please remember that there must be consistency and fidelity in the implementation of your interventions. Simply letting weeks go by with inconsistent interventions does not constitute a valid research-based intervention. If a student is showing progress with Tier 1 interventions in place, you may keep the child in Tier 1. Students' progress in the targeted area or goal shows that the intervention is working. A student may be in Tier 1 in one area, such as math, and also be in a Tier 2, such as reading. Each content area is separate on the PEP to allow for different tiers for reading and math. Tier 2 interventions should be something different than the previous Tier 1 intervention and more intensive in regards to frequency, quantity, and duration. Students in Tier 2 will receive the classroom support in addition to supplementary supports. Please be reminded that a Tier 2 PEP is required for any SAT referral. The PEP must be attached as part of the SAT referral paperwork. Tier 3 interventions are the most intensive and should only be considered when students have not responded to Tier 1 or Tier 2 interventions. Once again, it is important to note that interventions must be implemented consistently and should be research-based. Decisions to place a child on a Tier 3 should be discussed with your administrator, other grade level teachers, guidance counselor, and SAT. Moving a student to a Tier 3 does not mean that that student needs to be or must be referred to EC, but it is an indication that the student is not responding or progressing despite the interventions. Layering of support. PEPs address personalized learning and differentiation. Tier 1 is differentiated core. Tier 2, supplemental support, and this is in addition to Tier 1. And then Tier 3, intensive support. Although sometimes the same intervention may be used for students at Tier 2 and Tier 3, the frequency or the amount of time that a student spends with a particular intervention should differ. While students may spend 30 minutes per day, 3 days per week with a particular intervention in Tier 2, those students at Tier 3 may spend 30 minutes per day, 5 days per week in the same intervention. In addition to increasing the frequency and duration of an intervention, a teacher may also layer a new intervention as well. Progress monitoring in RTI. The level of monitoring positively correlates to the tier level. As the tier number increases, the amount of progress monitoring should also increase. Once a PEP is written, the following data points can be used for timely progress monitoring. Our district benchmark tests, Reading 3D, Dibbles K3, Days and Dorf grades 3 through 5, Classroom and Common Assessments, Fast Forward Reading Assistant. The next 3 slides is a summary of Tier 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1, Differentiated Core. Rigorous differentiated core instruction is provided to all students in the general education classroom, and we're using evidence-based instructional strategies. Also, these interventions are universal and available to all students, and this is delivered within the classroom. And these interventions should be put in place at the first sign that students are struggling. Tier 1 interventions attempt to answer the following question. Are routine classroom instructional modifications sufficient to help the student achieve academic success? Tier 2, supplemental support. Students continue to receive general or regular general instruction with the class. The primary purpose of Tier 2 instruction is to assist students in adapting to the general education class. Supplemental instruction is provided in any area in which students need additional support. So these interventions, they should be individualized and tailored to the needs of students. And then typically, these interventions will last 30 to 90 minutes, 2 to 5 times per week for 5 to 8 weeks. Students receive supplemental instruction individually or in small groups. Now, this is in addition to the small group instruction provided for the core curriculum. Now remember, students may be in a tier 1 in some subjects, but then in tier 2 for others. So tier 2 interventions attempt to answer the following question. Can an individualized intervention plan carried out in a general education setting bring the student up to the academic level of his or her peers? Tier 3, intensive support. Students in this tier did not progress in tier 2. So interventions in tier 3 are more individualized, and it may involve very small groups or one-on-one instruction. Individualized interventions are assessment based and are intensive. Instruction may last 30 to 180 minutes for a designated time period and is extremely targeted and intensive. So tier 3 supports attempt to answer the following question. What ongoing support does this student require, and in what settings should be provided to facilitate the greatest success possible? Timeline for homeless, retained, possible retention students, and students identified by teachers. The following timeline will be used this school year to guide the development, monitoring, and completion of our PEPs. We encourage parent participation in the process, and parents should be aware of the development and changes to the PEP. Parent signatures are encouraged for each quarter. Since we cannot include a parent's electronic signature, we are encouraging you to develop a signature card for parents to sign when they have reviewed the PEP. You can then transfer the date from the signature card to the PEP. You will see where this date is located in a later slide. We do recognize that homeless students may be more transient, and these students may enroll in your school throughout the year. As soon as a student is identified as homeless, regardless of their enrollment date, a PEP should be developed. The PEP will be monitored quarterly. Likewise, teachers may use their professional judgment to place a student on a PEP at any time, preferably before the end of the second quarter. Once a PEP is created, it will be monitored quarterly. Please keep this in mind when developing goals and interventions. Homeless and retained students. Complete background information and determine goals and intervention strategies for quarter 2. When? This is at the end of quarter 1, November the 2nd, 2015. Parent signature encouraged. Homeless and retained students, document progress monitoring of quarter 2 goals and interventions. Draft quarter 3 goals and update interventions. And then identification of possible retention students, complete background information, and determine goals and intervention strategies for quarter 3. This should be done at the end of quarter 2, January 29, 2016. Parent signatures are encouraged. Homeless and retained students, document progress monitoring of quarter 3 goal and interventions, and then draft quarter 4 goals and update interventions. Identification of possible retention students, document progress monitoring of quarter 3 goal and interventions, and then draft for quarter 4 goals and update interventions. This should be done at the end of quarter 3, April the 11th, 2016. Parent signature encouraged. Now all PEPs document progress monitoring of quarter 4 goals and interventions, and then close out the PEP. All PEPs must be printed out at the end of the school year. This is at the end of quarter 4, June 3rd, 2016. Parent signature encouraged. PEPs for SAT referrals. The timeline for students who have PEPs due to their probability of being referred to SAT is more challenging to detail exactly, since these PEPs may be created at different times throughout the grading periods. Standard practice will be update the PEP for each quarter that the PEP is in existence. Therefore, if it is developed in quarter 2, evidence of progress monitoring should take place at the end of quarter 2, and goals and interventions should be updated for quarter 3. All PEPs should be closed out at the end of the school year and printed. And this is at the end of quarter 4, June 3rd, 2016. Parent signatures are encouraged. Listing all PEPs for your school. A Google Sheet will be shared with the person at your school who will be responsible for monitoring PEPs. And in most cases, this person will be the guidance counselor. It also could be your assistant principal, academic coach, or instructional facilitator. All students who have a PEP created for them must be listed on the Google Sheet. The district will monitor the quality of your PEPs each quarter using the names from the Google Sheet. Accessing PEPs in PowerSchool from the teacher view. The teacher will log into PowerSchool, and from the teacher perspective, you want to click on the book bag to access teacher screens. Select the student from the left-hand side panel. Quick lookup is often the default. And then you want to select screens that's on the right, and then click on Personalized Education Plan. And now you're ready to input information. From the administration perspective, select the student, and then click on Personalized Education Plan. Now, this is the format for our Personalized Education Plan in PowerSchool. You have your PEP background information, and on this slide, on this tab, you have the reading level, math level, and then different identifications for the student. Quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4 are the tabs you will fill in at the end of each of those quarters, and then other relates to any other subjects other than your math and reading in which a child may need a PEP. So now looking at our reading level, you want to include data in terms of EOGs, EOCs, any benchmarks, and then any other reading data such as reading 3D and so forth. For math, you want to include the same type of data. And then you want to select which one is appropriate for your student. So if the child has been retained, that's elementary or secondary, you want to select the grade level. And then if the child is identified EC, ELL, migrant, or 504. Areas needing improvement and student academic strengths, you want to link those to a standard. So be very specific in terms of the information you input in these areas. Here under the quarter 2 tab, select the tier level of support, and then you want to create a specific and measurable goal. And then you want to look at the reading evidence-based intervention strategy 1. This will be a drop-down box, and here you want to select from the drop-down box. Now, the intervention effectiveness for reading strategy 1, this will not be completed until after the duration of the intervention. And you want to be very specific when you input this information. And then if the child has a second strategy, you will look at the reading evidence-based intervention strategy 2, and you will select from the drop-down box. And then, of course, the intervention effectiveness for reading strategy 2, you will not input this information until the child has completed the intervention duration. And then, of course, you have a strategy 3 and so forth. Here, you have the same for math that we had on the previous page. And then now you can also see where you have the date that the PEP is created. So you want to input that date. And then the date reviewed by the parent. And keep in mind, you do want to have a parent signature card for them to sign. And you want to use that date as your review date here to put into the PEP. And now you want to hit submit. Thank you for viewing our presentation in terms of the PEP expectations for Hope County Schools.